It's July 11th, 2023. I put up something. Maybe it'll seem controversial. I don't really know. It was a picture of the PGA Tour. I'm going to mention it in a moving video of exactly what I meant. But I'm in a place where the humans, there are the ancestors for which I know what July 4th means to them, for which I don't take lightly. Um, and for them, I do whatever I do and whatever they were allowed in their innocence to grow up within, while whatever's going on in the more insidious category has been taking fast and taking hold. And it's really frightening from a New York point of view, or from a New York vantage point. Where I feel completely disadvantaged in a DIS, just so we're crystal clear on words. Um, so I'm here and I'm watching the images. I'm going to start with On Balance with LELAND VITTERT, which is E136. The year is 2023. And this came out overnight on July 10th. Um, Now I'm watching his On the Balance. Now, last week in my news cycle, they came out with somebody left cocaine in the White House. And again, I am dealing with so much in New York at the moment, between tour buses of unexpected guests, we'll call them, just being dumped in my city where I am currently living as a resident in Count Queens, um, or Borough Queens, inside of a New York City station, and watching this unfold while my very real person is here. My biologic is being, I'm having problems medically. I'm trying to figure that out with whatever's going on chemical wise. Um, so there's that. Then there's this. So I'm watching that, and then I'm seeing, because I realized on this program that they put on somebody from Kentucky. Now, I grew up in a protected glen. Um, when I met the Shire representative, I had not been exposed to this level of, I guess, party. Like, I was not a club kid in the sense of Manhattan, like the movie stars get to go to, and I was like astronomer's kid. So there was very real restrictions on exposure to certain things. Um, so they have on this Kentucky um, person who also, but he grew up over state lines, and now he's in New York, and he's giving his perspective or his vantage from New York. Like, and I'm sitting here like, oh my God, thank God, because I know I'm not the only one. Like, there should be no way on God's green earth Tiafrio 1975 ever even crossed paths with me. Why was I dragged into a blacksmith situation with Falco and Tiafrio in that, like, whatever that was? I mean, as far as cosmic planning, I don't know who's doing what with trying to hurt me personally and by reputation, and just by, like, I mean, again, if I don't have access to private eye files, private investigator files, other people do. And if, I mean, I'm like, how do I, like, there's something, like, I can't talk about whatever I am, but what is this and why is it following me around, and how do I detach myself from it? I mean, it's been years. I've gone to Canada. I've gone to Vegas. I've gone all sorts of places to like, how does this just like move along? I mean, but yet it's just stuck like gum to my shoe. It's really confusing. I mean, without having to go in any explicit details. But here we are. And then I find the Mayan calendar of ancients in Mesoamerica. So interesting. They spelled Meso and then America. So just so Eric and I are on because I have two Erics that they sent. One with an Audi, just found out they have a line that's a quattro. That seems really important in the fourth. With all this Julying, the fourth in prose and prose, PRO and then PROSE. Um, so I'm just like, whatever on this. So I'm just going to, because they have a thing about Venus, and in Mesoamerica, it's ancient stars. They had on a whatever, which I'm going to reference. They follow these Mayans, are following Venus along with, again, sun gods. Like they mention a whole lot of stuff, and I'm listening to it very well, knowing what the astrological timing and incarnation was from my own personal situation, as to how pyramids line up perfectly with astrology. And I'm wondering why on God's green earth was my situation so bastardized. It seems it would only benefit war theater, for which like I again wanted like co-signment with the correct person, for like respectful for my flower. Like I was not looking for this bastardization and then this territorial like tear and divide and like, I mean, hustle and con artists. Like everywhere I look, it's like, what's the con job? What's the con job? What fix the con job? Like, I mean, putting band-aids on like gigantic wounds in the field. So I'm watching this now, trying to piece some of it together. I'm going to start with On the Balance with LELAND VITTERT.
Like, we're learning the House oversight.
Oh, and what this speaks to is that cocaine story. There, on my news cycle that I have access to through this portal system of television, in my station, Bayside Station, I was only able on my news programs, which obviously are now known, considering I've had enough history of following it. There were 3 different stories put out. In what I have access to and what I'm exposed to, it was only told one way. It was not told the other 2 ways. So I know in somebody's, like, I mean, again, at research development and doctorates, and they follow all sorts of threads of whatever. I know that's some of the homework you usually need to, like, send in to, like, whatever you report to. So I only had access to the story told one way. I only made mention of it in the story told one way, and it was one of these sidewinders almost, but again, I know it has relevance in somebody else's whatever, in the whatever.
Oversight Committee will get a briefing from the Secret Service this Thursday on the White House cocaine incident. It has now been 7 days, 22 hours, and 37 odd minutes since the discovery of cocaine was first made. Last week, we were promised answers. Some reports indicated a Secret Service report today. As of 7 p.m., nothing. And from the word go, we couldn't even get a straight answer from the White House about where the cocaine was.
Okay, so this story right here is the only story I was fed or that I had access to, the Tuesday version. I don't know what happened on Sunday. I don't know what happened on Thursday, but I only had access in New York to Tuesday's version. And I don't know how they spun out from there, but Tuesday's version is all I made mention of because it's all I had access to.
First, on Sunday, July 2nd, dispatchers were overheard from talking to the fire department, saying a substance was found in the library 2 floors below the private White House. Residents, don't worry, we were told. It's all part of the public tour area, as if there were thousands of people just wandering through the White House on a Sunday. Then on Tuesday, the 4th of July, the White House says the cocaine was near the ground entrance of the West Wing, a highly trafficked area. Again, tours come through here, lots of family and friends and members of congressional offices, so don't worry. It's a highly trafficked area. It couldn't have possibly been somebody important who left the cocaine.
And now, if I put this in context of like the Catholic brought this to the door of the Protestant who wanted nothing to do with it, I don't know if that puts it in better context of like how, as a single woman who doesn't want this in her house or anywhere near her, knowing that he disappears to boats and meetings and things that I'm not a part of, but he goes away and does whatever it is that he does. Like, I, for years, have been like, Mojito guy showed up, and I'm like, how? I know he pressed the situation of, he knew I didn't want to be with him. And I was like, so how do I get, like, how do I handle this? Like, right in front of the problem. So this way we'd be all square. But it just perpetuated and never got resolved. At least not resolved to my satisfaction, my standards.
Turns out that wasn't true. Then on Thursday, the White House comes out and claims the drugs were found in a highly secure area of the West Wing near the Situation Room, where the vice president and other high-level officials enter. Very few people are allowed to use that entrance. The mix-ups, of course, don't end there.
And if I keep that inside like an NRA or as an IRA context of just on the Isle of Ireland, yeah, your Southern Kerry guy is a real problem for my Northern Belfast person.
Don't end there. The facts surrounding Hunter Biden, the president's son and known cocaine addict, along with his whereabouts, well, the White House had some issues with that too.
The Biden family was not here. They were not here. They were at Camp David. They were not here Friday. They were not here Saturday. They were not here Sunday. They were not even here Monday. They came back on Tuesday. So to ask that question is actually incredibly irresponsible. And I'll just leave it there.
As you just heard, Karine Jean-Pierre says the Bidens were not there on Friday. And if you look at the picture on your screen, that's Joe and Hunter on Friday at the White House as they're heading for Camp David. Again, on Friday. Back with us now, Colby Hall, founding editor of Mediaite, frequent News Nation contributor. Look, whenever you're attacking the questioner, I always wonder why.
Right. When you're attacking the questioner, you're losing the battle, right? Let me say from the outset, I don't know who had this cocaine and where the investigation stands. And that's what's sort of fascinating about the story right now is that it's entirely speculative. We hear a lot about it, but there's very few facts and very few people that actually know the facts. And so depending upon how you see the Rorschach ink plot, either the White House, the Biden White House is clearly engaging in a cover-up, or the other side is there's much ado about nothing here, and it's being done purely as a political attack. And typically, the truth lies somewhere in between. Like, both things can be true. That the White House isn't being completely forthcoming, I'm not saying that that's the case. It could very well be the case. It also could mean this was some random person and not a Biden.
Oh, no,
and anything beyond that is sort of speculative.
No, it's totally speculative, and frankly, it doesn't really seem like that big of a deal. I mean, I walked in and out of the White House all the time back when I was a White House correspondent. Never brought cocaine in, but certainly I brought matches and all sorts of other things in my pockets and in my bags that the Secret Service didn't deem a threat. They're not searching for cocaine. It's not like somebody brought in a baggie of anthrax or something like that. So it's fun. It's salacious. Who cares? Until you realize how worried the White House seems about it and seems about the investigation, then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, why are you making such a big deal about this? Why are you so worried? And then on Friday, and I feel compelled, or on Thursday night, I feel compelled to replay this soundbite. You had MSNBC trying to get out in front of it by saying, hey, don't worry. There's cocaine in the White House before, going all the way back to the 1940s. Take a listen.
There is a fascinating and storied history of drugs and other illicit substances found in or near the seat of power right here in the U.S. This is not the first time that cocaine may have been found in the White House. Can you talk a little about the era of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and what was happening then?
Absolutely. So cocaine used to be used in a number of medications because it has the effect of restricting blood vessels. So, for example, Franklin Delano Roosevelt had a lot of sinus problems.
It's stunning. It's stunning. It's this sort of historic bending over backwards with history to frame this story as though it's completely innocent. But I think it speaks to a larger issue here that no one's really speaking about. And that is, I grew up in suburban Kansas. Cocaine to me was forbidden. It was a hard narcotic. It was like close to heroin. And cocaine still is like sort of a dangerous drug. I've since learned, since living to New York, that it's not that uncommon. In fact, it's pretty common. And so I feel like you see a lot of the media elite reporters who are saying, it was a little bit of blow, like what's the big deal? When in fact, most of America say, like, you don't just carry around a bag of cocaine, especially in the White House. So I think we're seeing sort of a divided America with regard to how people are reacting to this story. Cocaine was in the White House.
All I'm going to say is you got a lot cooler friends than I do, buddy. That's why we have you on. That's why we love you so much. We got to run.
I'm
it's
the
good to see you.
Thank you so much, Leland.
A few months away now from the Iowa.
Now, on that same whatever, I noticed some people like this whole, especially when I think of my grandfather's generation, for whom I really hold in high admiration, but we're not in that world any longer, where it is like marriage actually meant something, but you also, there was some way, and I don't know how, that he was introduced to like this woman of his dreams. I mean, this woman who, the man until he died cried over her, like after she passed. I mean, the sense of longing for this person that you treasure. Like, that's what's been missing in New York as far as my arrival. Never had it, was never, like, it would never formalize or officialize, which is even more disgusting when you go into the calendar of the Mayans and Venus and tracking the stars and the astrology, and then these women who have these perfect celestial alignments with their children, and then how planets and other things fall into alignment. So, and where that's really key is at War Theater, in order to figure out which one, where, and how far off, and where was it pulled off, which, again, that level of specificity and that level of GOD and knowing for certain without a shadow of a doubt of who's responsible really scares a lot of people. But it exists. So now here, they played this last night on Channel 23, which was New Jersey's PBS. It was called Gods and Monsters. It aired originally 7/24/2019. I only saw it July 10th of 2023. It says the relationship between humans and the skies, including how ancestors used the skies to navigate. it seems very, this admission by these humans who study this artwork form and these curators of the museums, it seems very like, wow, that's a really interesting topic for you to pursue. It must have been a passion or whatever. I mean, again, that would be what my conversation is. Except if you take it to gaming and sporting, and you take it to rigging the results of elections and trying to overthrow governments and industry, and having this like very big revolting event, all like very like a revolution almost, like right before one's eyes, that nobody really speaks of in the correct context. And then knowing that there are specific astrological signs um, that are whatever. And if they're being harmed or being kept in a position just so someone else could use it to eclipse something else, that speaks to some real leveled concern at leveling the playing field, um, in order to fix my very real situation, because it's not okay. And the way that things are going here for the future of my children, um, it's also not all right. But again, how do you get that level of message out and signal um, to tracking and your potential team members that you're one of these, whatever? Like at that point, like who can you trust? I haven't found anyone.
Astronomical information that we have in the Dresden Codex are mainly on Venus cycles and the eclipse cycles, or the eclipse, lunar and solar eclipse. This is the most important thing.
Venus was particularly important to the Mayans. Its presence in the...
Now, one of my children, they even said in the year, right during and before his arrival, they lined up this sensational, trendy headline of the Mayan calendar. And according to the Egyptians in Giza, it's in 1/15 of a degree. I'm like, wow. Uh-huh. Burying the truth in the details. Like the devil's in the details. That's what it seems like at the moment. And then, but it's again, I also have the symmetrical arrangement with the sky gods and the appearance of birth in this whatever, while climate and is a concern and environmental is a concern, and I'm in this small area or room and I don't know how to get out. So again, it's public school during the day, Monday through Friday. On the weekend, there's a visit to Sunday school for my son at the moment, because I don't know, it just looks normal New York.
In the sky had the possibility to predict warfare. And by watching Venus closely, the Mayans were able to make a discovery about it that eluded other civilizations.
One of the fascinating...
So again, like I've had several calendar events. The first child was Y2K. Last child was Mayan calendar. So now are these two problem civilizations that think that they own something and are fighting over something? I don't know. There's a war in Ukraine. They're mad at Russia. I don't really know what that means. It looks like Biden like put in a Biafra looking whatever, and it looks like some other alien civilization is trying to take over New York at the moment. I mean, like it gets, but claiming, like screaming about Jesus and God. I mean, it's just, it's it depends on what area you're looking from through the scope. You're either disgusted or you're laughing your ass off. I mean, like, again, I'm just sitting neutral at the moment.
Things about Mesoamerican astronomers is that they figured out that Venus was a single entity. Whereas in much of the world, people thought that it was an evening star and a morning star, and they were two separate beings. But Mesoamericans figured out that there was a cycle where it returns to the same spot on the landscape.
The calculations for the Venus cycles can be seen here in the dots and bars that the Mayans used to signify numbers.
They calculated the correct day when there was a Venus as morning star, when there was a Venus as evening star. The phase of the Venus is 583 point something days, and they calculated 584 days. So after 13 years, there's a deviation of 1 day. They corrected this one day. So according to the knowledge that we have today, these predictions of the Venus positions were very exact.
So that's that. So now let's go see where this Mesoamerican, where this like matters in a modern day by looking to hear on See the BS this morning what my White House representatives are like in the basement of the White House before they reach, I don't know if it's the Russell stairs, but like whatever staircase they're going up. To see just what they're saying about LIV, the LIV, and the PGA, because when I arrived, there was a man by the name of Nicholson, and there was golf. Golf was a sacred cultural, like the Highlands of Scotland, and it was kept green, and it was not just some common knowledge. It was not some common sport. And again, it's been bastardized. Essentially, it looks like it's been bought out. But I could say the same is what my disgust is at the moment with the U.S. Army. When I look at it, I'm like, where is the us in the U.S. at the moment? Like the origins, the founders, the one that's actually on the monetary system. So it's CBS E137.
Look at that.
Like that. Wow.
So whether you're
how much is
PGA leaders are on Capitol Hill today defending their controversial merger with a Saudi-backed rival.
The Saudis are taking over the entire sport.
Northwestern University.
Now, they're highlighting golf. Golf uses this word for, because I really think that you're lying at the fourth. But there's also this Sioux lying as well from the top, which is a real problem, and an ongoing problem that I've faced. So I'm watching this, and it doesn't look like it. I mean, like, I don't normally watch sports, but I turn on anything athletic, and it no longer they call it America. And I'm like, no, it's not. It doesn't even look American. It's like they're trying to rebrand America and like corrode from the inside out. It's a real problem. I mean, I don't know where they're drafting from. I don't know what they're sponsoring. I don't know what kind of alliances they're making without any of the children of like the monetary system and the founding fathers. Like, I'm not being asked like for these sports contracts, why don't they have an applicable pool of the American forefathers' children to draw upon, not only for the U.S. Army, but also for sports and athletics, for our American-based sports teams? Why has the face of American sports teams completely changed and no longer looks American?
Now to Washington, where top executives from the PGA Tour are due to testify this morning at a Senate hearing on its controversial new partnership with Saudi-backed LIV Golf. As Scott McFarland reports, the deal has drawn outrage.
The shocking announcement last month that the PGA Tour was merging with its rival, LIV Golf, ended a bitter year-long battle marked by massive lawsuits, competing tournaments, and the poaching of star players.
So I am acutely aware of how business deals can override things like human rights abuses and murder.
Kristen Breitweiser's husband, Ron, died in the South Tower of the World Trade Center on September 11th. She slammed the PGA Tour's alliance with a company backed by financiers from Saudi Arabia.
I think my son asked me to watch out of the blue last night. He's like, Mom, can we watch the Lego movie since it's now free on the whatever, on the demand? So we watched like maybe the first 20 minutes of it. And it almost touches on this. It's the president, but the president of the business office. And then whatever else is going on at the construction company. And again, like, I don't think I need to say it, but like, sometimes the word company is pronounced empressa.
A nation linked to 9/11, though its rulers have always denied any direct involvement.
I just think that people that are involved in those deals should remain conscious of people like me and maybe try to ensure that going forward we could have some peace.
One longtime member of the PGA Tour's policy board resigned this week in protest of the deal with LIV. And today, U.S. senators will question 2 PGA Tour officials who brokered the deal. As for LIV Golf, the company declined to have its executive, longtime golf icon Greg Norman, appear to testify, citing conflicts.
They're not just buying a team, they're buying the whole sport.
Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut initiated the probe to look into whether the Saudis are investigating so deeply in popular U.S. sports to soften the image of a nation long accused of human rights abuses.
Okay, what I'm concerned about, I'm concerned that they're not only doing this sports thing, getting their players, because like along with each one of their like $1 million contracts comes some entourage of like husbands, wives, support staff, and whatever. And now all of a sudden the colony no longer looks Victorian and colonial like. It now all of a sudden looks like an invasion from some other territory. And like the people that live here are like, what's going, where did our government go? Where did our voices go? Where did our schools go? Where did our tribes go? And how does one who is part of the established here and part of the system here that still exists, still works, and still has funding, how do we push back against this level of like silent invasion?
The monarchy is taking over, apparently, this cherished, iconic American institution for the clear purpose of cleansing its public image.
But he's not the monarchy on our monetary system, which is what I don't understand. I now see that Janet Yellen, thank goodness, went over to China. I mean, there are other people watching this level of war theater. And she was wearing a purple jacket, so thank you. And then she had to have a conversation with Beijing, which I greatly appreciate. I mean, and they were still upset about the word balloon and the word airship, for which I appreciate that they took the time to listen to her at this point, because there's other things I've seen that I'm more concerned about at the moment, but the fact that she was able to go over there in her purple jacket, red and blue makes purple, as far as I know.
And there is a bipartisan push to get answers from Republican Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri.
Is this an attempt to get rid of a competitor? I want to know exactly what the financial stakes are.
Another PGA Tour executive who will testify today argues the deal will help the tour survive years of litigation and challenges, and that the Saudi partners will not have control over the game or the operations. The PGA Tour tells us they'll seek to meet with those 9/11 victims' families as early as next week. Gail.
Well, I know the families want to talk to them. Thank you, Scott. Still ahead, an upset at Wimbledon brings a...
Now here, this aired. It was E26 CBS Saturday mornings. This is about the U.S. Army.
Welcome back to CBS Saturday Morning. We begin this half hour with America's all-volunteer military. It's served the nation for more than 5 decades, but now recruiting is a growing problem. Not because of a lack of interest, but because too many potential recruits fall short of current military standards. Though some say it's those standards that actually need to change. Correspondent David Martin has the story.
Not everybody gets to meet the boss their first day on the job.
Now, in this Biden administration, they're referring to him as the boss of the U.S. Army.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me.
But these brand new members of the armed forces got to meet Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin as he marked a major milestone.
But 50 years ago this week, the United States stopped drafting citizens into service and turned instead to an all-volunteer force.
It was...
And now it no longer looks like the establishment, the settlement, the Victorian into the colonial age. It now looks like some invasion from multiple alien civilizations that no longer look like the founding forefathers. This is concerning.
Created at the end of the Vietnam War to replace the widely unpopular draft. But former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper says the all-volunteer force is showing its age.
The all-volunteer force is on a long, slow decline due to a number of demographic and cultural trends that need to be arrested, or else we will find ourselves in a tough situation years down the road.
According to Pentagon statistics, only 1 in 4 young Americans meets the mental and physical requirements to join.
Look, or your heels down to the ground.
Making it increasingly difficult for the military to find enough volunteers to fill the ranks.
Ready, stretch.
The Army has started a prep camp for those.
And so that aired on Saturday. Today's Tuesday. And this morning, the message that's coming through is about a NATO summit where now they're meeting, and there's another Nordic country allowed to join. Again, I can follow the threads and I can see where it's at least acknowledging that there's some level of problem. And I'm trying to watch it as it starts to like steady and balance itself.
This morning for crucial meetings with America's allies in NATO. The leaders there have got a lot to talk about, but the main focus will be almost entirely on Russia and the threat it poses to Eastern Europe. Nancy Cordes has made her way to the summit in Vilnius. That's the capital of Lithuania, and she joins us now. Nancy, good morning.
Good morning to you, Tony. And the leaders who are gathered here are starting out this summit with a win, an agreement to allow a powerful Nordic country to join the NATO alliance. A signal to Putin, they argue, that his unprovoked war against Ukraine has united the West against him. President Biden arrived in Lithuania's capital to good news. NATO member Turkey suddenly dropping its opposition to Sweden's NATO membership. Sweden will now follow Finland into the growing alliance.
This is a historic moment. Adding Finland and Sweden to NATO is consequential.
This is the first meeting of NATO leaders since the Wagner mercenary group attempted mutiny in Russia last month. A Russian spokesman confirmed that Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin 5 days after that uprising.
Prigozhin has not been seen since. Protecting NATO's eastern flank from an increasingly unstable Russia is at the top of the agenda today.
Our pledge to be with you has not wavered.
And as Russia's assault on Ukraine enters its 17th month, leaders here say they'll unveil a long-awaited reform path today that Ukraine can take to someday join NATO itself.
How long do you anticipate it will take Ukraine to make those reforms once the war has ended?
I can't put a timetable on it. I don't believe that you will see that coming out of here. This is about the substance of democratic and security sector reforms and getting those right.
But that approach appears to be too vague for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who is on his way here right now and just issued a scathing statement saying that it's, quote, unprecedented and absurd to place new requirements on Ukraine without a specific timetable for NATO membership. He says it's only going to embolden Russia and that he's prepared to make that case when he gets here later today. Gail?
Nancy, we thank you. Also joining us now from Lithuania is Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Mr. Secretary, always good to see you. I know you're very busy today, so thank you for taking the time.
Good morning, Gail.
Let's start. We know Sweden is now following Finland into NATO. What message do you think that this will send to Russia? What message do you want it to send, if any?
Now, I see over her head, they very cleverly put up Times Square. She doesn't represent me. I don't have any access to her. We don't have direct line of communication. And as far as I know, none of her children were born in symmetrical alignment with her birthday. So with what's going on, that's a red flag for me. As far as false flags go, in calling out what's so blatantly obvious. It should be New York over her head, although that sends problems in other aspects of whatever. So, like, I really don't know what it is that, I mean, like, they have to put where she is in time and space, but I don't know how they work up implied agreements, because it's implied with whom? Who are they agreeing with? Now here's E136. This is Cuomo talking about this last night.
Abilities, they still have a lot of advantages over Ukraine, and especially if you want to root them out in the areas they've been for so long. Now, here's the part I care about. Russia has been killing more and more civilians, okay? They just killed civilians in an aid station, a humanitarian aid station. And the idea of, well, it was just an accident. Look, sometimes there are accidents. There's no reason to believe this was, okay? So here's the key question for us now. The United States gave Ukraine cluster munitions to it.
Now, this is really interesting because on Cuomo, on this episode, he takes a call from a caller who's talking about World War II and being drawn into World War II now. Now it's the year 2023. So I'm like, that's interesting. But I'm listening. He doesn't call it out. He just lets her go, thinking that it's World War II. And then he just says whatever he says. But I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, wait a minute.
The idea of consequence in what you say about people because you're not actually in front of them and you don't have to own it. So we're desperate for better. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is, Martine, better begins with you and it begins with me. You control how you are and what you react to, and I do the same. That's all we got. You know what I mean? From there, it's up to everybody else. You can be upset about it, but be part of the solution as well. Next.
Okay, very quickly, Jennifer, quick.
Jen, what's your
Okay,
question?
I just wanted to ask Chris, this doesn't have to do with Prigozhin right now, but it's the fact that I know the thought of, if everyone brings Ukraine into NATO, that could bring on World War II. A war against one is a war against all of us. I want to know Chris's opinion. Is that, by not accepting Ukraine into World War II, it's empowering Putin to think that all of NATO is afraid of him, and that's going to empower him. I wanted to know Chris's thoughts.
Hopefully, people are too clever for that. Everybody knows that Ukraine won't be getting a vote on NATO anytime soon. The conflict would have to end first. That's known. So I don't think that Putin can really weaponize the absence of their membership. And I don't know that it even happens. We'll have to see. What really happens is keeping the resolve and the collective conscience together that you can't go into another country and start killing civilians and try to claim high ground or mandate. That's what matters most. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I'll send you into the upgrade for Dan Abrams. Who's that? I'll tell you in a second.
All right, and this was this Sunday, Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan. They had on Janet Yellen for the U.S. Treasury, and she kept repeating this narrow view, for which I greatly appreciated. And I saw she was wearing this color purple, or it's not a lavender or a lilac. It's the color purple. But again, in the American movie closet, they've made that word or that phrase into something that might bring up a different image.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We're going to take a closer look at the brutal heat that has settled in across the country during a later point in this broadcast. But this spoiler alert, the extreme weather is expected to intensify. Another issue that's heating up, trade disputes between the U.S. and China. Janet Yellen is the second cabinet secretary to make a goodwill mission to Beijing in the last few weeks. We spoke with her exclusively before she departed China. At the top of your meeting with the Chinese vice premier, he actually acknowledged one of those awkward moments. He mentioned the Chinese spy balloon. He called it an airship. Can you say at this point that tension has been smoothed over?
Well, what I can tell you is that I had a very constructive visit. I received a warm welcome and had very substantive series of meetings. We had substantive conversations about the global economy, developments in our own economies, financial markets, and a list of concerns that each of us brought to the table that we agreed to follow up on over time.
Understood. The U.S. ambassador to China, Nick Burns, told me just last month that 4 or 5 different American companies had been experiencing intimidation at the hand of Chinese authorities, and he pointed towards an espionage law that had recently been rolled out. Did you get assurances that American firms won't be intimidated?
Well, that certainly is one of the concerns that I expressed. I had the chance to meet with American businesses and to hear about their concerns, but and certainly in my meetings, that is a concern that I raised. It's something that we will have further conversations about and try to address over time.
The administration has taken some targeted national security focused measures that do impact trade and the economy, including some restrictions on high-end technology sales. The administration is reportedly also considering restrictions on computer chips related to artificial technology and cloud computing. Do you have a sense of what the retaliation will be from China when the U.S. does this?
Well, an objective of my trip was to explain that national security is something that we can't compromise about and we will protect. And we will do so even if it harms our own narrow economic interests, but that when we take such actions, which do have an effect on the Chinese economy, that we will make sure that they are transparent, narrowly targeted, and well explained. And this is a point that I tried to make in my conversations with Chinese counterparts. I would point out that the Chinese also protect their own national security through export controls and other similar devices, including controls on outbound investment. I explained that President Biden is examining potential controls on outbound investment in certain very narrow, high technology areas, and that if we go forward with these, that they will be indeed very narrowly targeted and not should not be something that will have a significant impact on the investment climate between our two countries.
You're talking there, I think, about the long-delayed executive order that would put some restrictions on what American companies can do when it comes to investing in China. Is that still in question? Did you hear anything in your meetings that would make you tweak it, change it, pull back from it?
So this entire thread, as far I hear that now, I mean, they're talking that Elon Musk and the guy from Facebook, I can't remember his name, but whatever, they're doing something between a Facebook and a Twitter, and now they just came out with something called a Threads. It's something the trendy kids are doing. I don't really know. So I'm going to pause this for a second, and then I'm just going to reference where I am at the moment for making sure that it's all put together correctly for where I am and where my concerns are at the moment. So where my feet are is this symbol, and then where the reference for the monetary system for which I'm within is there's the picture of the forefathers and this area's forefathers along with this one. Just for the rest of the content of my message and some of my growing concerns. I'm not wanting to be an alarmist, however, it's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.